March 1942. The North African desert is already awake. The sun rises quickly here, pulling heat out of the sand before the day has fully begun. Engines cough to life. Radios crackle with static. Men wipe dust from their eyes and wait for orders that may not come in time. Near the front lines, Erwin Rommel stands beside a map spread across the hood of a vehicle. The paper flutters in the wind. Lines drawn days ago no longer match reality. Fuel is low. Ammunition is rationed. The enemy is regrouping. Thousands of kilometers away, Adolf Hitler begins his morning briefing in Europe. Reports arrive neatly typed. Distances are abstract. The desert exists only as symbols on a map. Rommel knows what the numbers do not show. The wear on men. The fragility of supply lines. The cost of standing still in open sand. Orders from Berlin continue to arrive. Hold ground. Advance when possible. Do not retreat. Between these two men, one close enough to hear artillery in the distance, the other surrounded by walls and naps, a quiet tension is forming. It does not explode in argument. It builds slowly, shaped by distance, belief, and the reality of modern war. To understand when that tension became a turning point, it is necessary to step back to how this relationship began. By early 1941, the Second World War had already reshaped Europe. Germany's rapid victories in Poland, Norway, the Low Countries, and France had stunned the world. The Wehrmacht appeared unstoppable. Speed, coordination, and decisive leadership defined its early campaigns. Yet beyond Europe, the war was expanding into regions Germany had not originally planned to dominate. North Africa became one such theater. Italy, Germany's ally, had entered the war with ambitions in the Mediterranean and Africa. But Italian forces in Libya struggled against British troops stationed in Egypt. By late 1940, British counteroffensives had inflicted heavy losses, threatening to collapse Italy's position entirely. For Adolf Hitler, North Africa was not a priority at first. His attention remained focused on Europe and preparations for a future campaign against the Soviet Union. Still, the collapse of an ally carried strategic risks. Losing Libya would expose southern Europe and weaken Axis credibility. In February 1941, Germany intervened. A limited force, the Afrika Korps, was dispatched to stabilize the front. The mission was defensive. Hold the line. Support Italian units. Avoid large commitments. To lead this force, Hitler selected Erwin Rommel. Rommel was not chosen for political loyalty or administrative skill. He was chosen because of reputation. His leadership during the 1940 French campaign, particularly commanding the 7th Panzer Division, had earned him fame. He was aggressive, adaptable, and willing to lead from the front. Rommel arrived in Libya with limited forces, unclear authority, and vague instructions. Yet almost immediately, he began to act beyond his mandate. Reconnaissance revealed British weaknesses. Italian morale was low but recoverable. Opportunity existed. Within weeks, Rommel launched attacks that exceeded his orders. British forces were pushed back. Territory was regained. The front stabilized and then advanced. In Berlin, the results were welcomed. Rommel's victories provided propaganda value and appeared to validate bold action. Hitler's initial caution toward Africa softened. The Desert War became a stage where German momentum seemed to continue. But beneath the surface, a difference in perception had already formed. Hitler saw success in arrows moving forward on naps. Rommel saw success as temporary, fragile. Dependent on supply lines stretching across sea and sand, that difference would grow as the campaign continued. As 1941 turned into 1942, Rommel's reputation expanded. He became known as the Desert Fox, a commander who used speed, deception, and initiative to offset numerical disadvantages. British commanders struggled to predict his movements. His forces maneuvered deep into enemy territory, often with limited support. Hitler admired this style. Rommel appeared to embody the ideal of decisive leadership. He was frequently praised in briefings. His name featured prominently in German media. Yet admiration came with expectation. Success led to pressure to repeat it. Each advance raised expectations of another. Meanwhile, the underlying conditions of the campaign worsened. North Africa was defined by logistics. Every shell, every drop of fuel, every replacement vehicle had to cross the Mediterranean, vulnerable to Allied naval and air power. Ports were limited. Transport capacity was strained. Italian shipping losses mounted. Rommel understood this acutely. He wrote repeatedly about shortages. Fuel often arrived too late or in insufficient quantities. Vehicles broke down faster in desert conditions. Reinforcements were inconsistent. Hitler, however, increasingly viewed Africa as a test of will. Retreat was unacceptable. Ground once taken must be held. The symbolic value of territory grew more important than its strategic sustainability. Command relationships became strained. Rommel technically operated under Italian command structures, while also receiving directives from German high command. Authority was divided. Decision-making slowed. Despite these challenges, Rommel continued to push forward. In early 1942, Axis forces advanced toward Egypt. Tobruk fell in June after a long siege, delivering a significant psychological blow to the British. Hitler was pleased. Promotions followed. Expectations rose again, but Tobruk also marked a shift. The distance from supply bases increased. The British adapted their tactics. Allied air superiority improved. Rommel's margin for maneuver narrowed. From this point onward, success required not just boldness, but restraint. And restraint was increasingly difficult to reconcile with the orders coming from Berlin. As pressures mounted on both sides. The relationship between commander and leader entered a new phase, one defined by conflicting realities. From the human angle, Rommel remained deeply connected to his troops. He visited front positions frequently, sometimes exposing himself to danger. Soldiers saw him as present, aware of their conditions. He observed exhaustion firsthand. He saw what heat and scarcity did to morale. This closeness shaped his decisions. Rommel believed in movement, not as recklessness, but as survival. Static defense in the desert invited destruction. He favored initiative because waiting often meant losing. From the leadership angle, Hitler's approach was fundamentally different. He ruled through centralized authority. Decisions flowed downward. Obedience was expected, not debated. In earlier campaigns, this system appeared effective. In Africa, it became rigid. Hitler rarely adjusted orders based on local conditions. Reports passed through layers of command. Delays distorted reality. By the time information reached Berlin, it was already outdated. From the tactical angle, desert warfare punished hesitation. Visibility was vast. Cover was minimal. Supply dictated possibility. Rommel's tactics relied on rapid exploitation. Hitler's directives emphasized holding positions. These approaches increasingly clashed, not through open confrontation, but through incompatible assumptions. The battlefield continued to narrow those differences into something more consequential. Technology and logistics formed another critical angle. German armored units depended on fuel more than manpower. Tanks without fuel were immobile targets. Rommel repeatedly warned that advances outpaced supply capacity. British forces, learning from earlier defeats, targeted supply lines rather than front units. Air raids disrupted ports. Convoys were intercepted. Shortages worsened. From the enemy perspective, Allied commanders began to recognize that Rommel's strength was also a vulnerability. His reliance on speed left him exposed when momentum stalled. Attrition favored the Allies, who had shorter supply routes and growing industrial capacity. The moral angle emerged quietly. Rommel began to weigh obedience against responsibility. Orders to stand fast conflicted with battlefield reality. Withdrawal, while strategically sound, carried political risk. Rommel did not openly defy Hitler, but his reports grew more cautious. His tone changed. Confidence gave way to concern. These angles converged in mid-1942. As the campaign approached a decisive moment. By July 1942, Axis forces reached El Alamein, a narrow front between the Mediterranean Sea and impassable desert terrain. Here, maneuver space vanished. Supply shortages intensified. British defenses hardened. Rommel's health deteriorated. He suffered from exhaustion and illness, aggravated by stress and the environment. Still, he attempted to break through. Hitler ordered no retreat. The First Battle of El Alamein halted the Axis advance. Losses mounted. Fuel shortages became critical. Rommel requested withdrawal to shorten lines and regroup. The response from Berlin was firm. Hold positions. Victory was still expected. Rommel now faced a reality he could not reshape through initiative alone. The desert no longer rewarded boldness. It demanded sustainability. This realization marked the turning point, not as a single argument, but as an internal shift. Rommel understood that his judgment no longer aligned with Hitler's expectations. The war entered a new phase. In October 1942, the Second Battle of El Alamein began. British forces, now under Bernard Montgomery, launched a carefully prepared offensive. Superior numbers, artillery, and supply ensured sustained pressure. Rommel was absent during the opening stages due to illness. When he returned, the situation was already deteriorating. Losses were heavy. Reserves were insufficient. Again, Rommel requested permission to withdraw. Again,
Only when
refused.
collapse was imminent did authorization come too late to preserve cohesion. Axis forces retreated westward under constant attack. Rommel complied. But the trust that once existed was gone. Shortly afterward, Rommel was recalled from Africa. His command ended not in victory, but in managed defeat. The turning point had passed. The North African campaign concluded in May 1943 with the surrender of remaining Axis forces. Over 250,000 troops were captured. The Mediterranean balance shifted decisively. For Germany, Africa became a lesson in overextension. For Hitler, it reinforced reliance on ideological certainty over adaptability. Rommel returned to Europe with diminished influence. His battlefield experience now contrasted sharply with strategic decisions made elsewhere. The consequences extended beyond Africa. Hitler increasingly isolated himself from frontline realities. Command structures tightened. Flexibility diminished. Rommel's later role in Europe reflected his disillusionment. He continued to serve, but with growing awareness of the limits imposed by centralized command. The turning point between Rommel and Hitler was not betrayal. It was divergence between experience and ideology. The story of Rommel and Hitler in North Africa is not one of dramatic confrontation. It is quieter than that. More instructive, it shows how modern war exposes the distance between decision and consequence. Maps simplify. Battlefields do not. Authority can issue orders, but it cannot change terrain, supply, or human endurance. Rommel believed war was shaped by conditions. Hitler believed it was shaped by will. For a time, success allowed both views to coexist. But as pressure mounted, reality asserted itself. The desert did not bend to belief. It demanded adaptation. This turning point reminds us that leadership is not measured by control alone, but by listening to facts, to limits, and to those closest to the ground. When that connection breaks, outcomes follow. In North Africa, the cost was not only defeat, but the loss of trust between command and reality. And that lesson would echo far beyond the desert sands, shaping the course of the war that followed.